Good afternoon, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Before I go any further, I would like to just note that there's a few members that are being replaced today. Je souhaite la bienvenue à Linda Lepointe.
I would like to welcome Linda Lepointe, who's joining us today, replacing Matt Generou. As well, I see that Mario Boulieu is with us, replacing Alexis Deschênes, so welcome to both of you.
Seebeck, who is joining us as part of the Conservative team, I'd like to warmly welcome you as well. So with that, bienvenue à la réunion numéro 30.
Welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format.
For the benefits of the witnesses and members, as always, kindly wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those that are on Zoom, kindly click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Further on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either English or French. And for those in the room, you could use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Je tiens à rappeler aux témoins.
I would like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers.
Ensure that all your comments are addressed through the chair. Members, please do not forget to raise your hand if you wish to speak. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can. I will remind everyone to please not speak over each other, as it will be hard for our translators to translate, and it makes their jobs difficult. I will let everyone know when you have 1 minute left. Je vous le dirai quand il vous restera seulement une minute.
I will let you know once you have only 1 minute left. I thank you all for your cooperation.
1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on May 6, 2026. The committee is commencing its study of attracting and empowering global talent to strengthen Canada's economy. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue à nos...
I would now like to welcome our witnesses for today's meeting.
We have 3 witnesses today from 2 organizations. From the building trades of Alberta, coming in by video conference, we have Terry Parker, Executive Director. Welcome, Mr. Parker. Pour le Conseil canadien des...
For the Council of Canadian Innovators, we have Laurent Carbonneau, Vice President, Policy and Advocacy, as well as Daniel Perry, Director, Federal Affairs. Welcome to both of you.
We will have up to 5 minutes will be given to both Building Trades of Alberta as well as the Conseil canadien des innovateurs for opening remarks, after which we'll proceed with rounds of questions. Mr. Parker, I now invite you to begin your opening statement. Your 5 minutes begins right now.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Terry Parker. I'm the Executive Director of the Building Trades of Alberta. We advocate for over 60,000 unionized, skilled trade workers across the residential, commercial, industrial, and maintenance sectors in Alberta. Our priority is a strong, safe, and sustainable construction industry in Alberta that provides quality careers for Canadian workers while addressing genuine labor needs. We support well-managed immigration as a complement, not a substitute, for investing in domestic workers. Alberta is in a unique position due to the lack of work for young Albertans. With all the talk to the perceived labor shortages, we don't see it as in the Building Trades of Alberta. At points in the last few months, we've seen up to 40% unemployment amongst our unionized affiliates. Do not get me wrong, we believe in diversity. We want to bring in more young Canadians, more Indigenous people, more women in the trades, and more new Canadians. But what we're seeing out there is a lot of abuse that's happening with the temporary foreign worker program currently, where temporary foreign workers are coming into the country, working in the agriculture sector or other sectors, and then moving over into the construction industry. And what's happening with this is we're seeing undocumented workers coming into the country as well. And with that, it's creating wage suppression and making it very hard for our contractors to compete with these unscrupulous contractors that are doing this. What's happening is we're seeing safety risk and a displacement of Canadian workers, i.e. our members. We don't disagree with temporary foreign workers. At points, we actually utilize the program through what we call our ACTIMS program, which we work with owners and our contractors to bring in temporary foreign workers at peak periods in order to help us and our contractors fulfill their obligations out there. But like I said, we are seeing a number of abuses out there currently. What we need to see happening more that hasn't been happening is more labor market opinions and surveys that go back to our contractors and our affiliated unions, which will then give more information back to the federal government in order to stop a lot of these practices from currently happening. We need more oversight by the federal government and the provincial government, more audits being happening, and more monitoring of unscrupulous contractors. So with all of that, I hope this helps, and I'm open for any questions that can come after this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parker. We now turn to the Council of Canadian Innovators, who will be speaking. Okay, Mr. Perry, please, we'll begin with you. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Daniel Perry. I'm the Director of Federal Affairs at the Council of Canadian Innovators. I'm joined by my colleague Laurent Carbonneau, our Vice President of Policy and Advocacy. The Council of Canadian Innovators is Canada's 21st Century Business Council. We represent over 175 Canadian headquartered high-growth technology firms operating in sectors including artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, dual use, and defense. The global race for highly skilled talent is fierce. For Canadian innovators, the challenge is simple. If they are unable to hire the right people, they cannot scale. This means that the jobs, companies, and economic value that they are creating here in Canada are at risk of moving elsewhere. Canada's immigration system must reflect this new reality. It needs to be fast, it needs to be focused and agile, while also maintaining high standards and a system with integrity. Skilled immigration plays an important role in filling gaps and mismatch parts of our workforce. 70% of Canadian businesses in the tech sector have identified the shortage of skilled workers as a major barrier for their success. Bringing in specialized talent does not displace Canadians. Instead, it helps Canadian companies compete, grow, and ultimately create more opportunity here in Canada. Upskilling matters, but it cannot replace the challenges that we're seeing in the labour market currently. The people applying to come to Canada through the global talent stream, as well as Canada's startup visa, are programmers, they're engineers, they're innovators, and they're entrepreneurs. They are the people that are powering the 21st century economy, and we need more of them in order for our economy to be successful. CCI was a founding member and is a current referral partner in the global talent stream. This program is one of the most practical tools for high-growth companies in order to access the specialized talent that they need in order to succeed. Since the program's inception in 2017, over 32,000 highly skilled individuals have come to Canada to support these companies. We might ask, what does this program mean for Canadian innovators? Well, one expert, one leader can shape whether a product makes it to market in time. It defines if they're able to win more customers, and ultimately allows their team to grow here in Canada. The Global Talent Stream is a targeted and regulated program that is used sparingly in comparison to other immigration channels. From 2017 to the first quarter of 2025, it represents just 2.6% of all positive labor market assessments. As the government reevaluates its immigration policies, the program should remain available for Canadian firms with strong oversight. One area that does warrant closer scrutiny is how the program is being used by foreign multinationals. For instance, between 2017 and the first quarter of 2025, Amazon received nearly 1,500 positive global talent stream assessments. For context, this represents 22% of all global talent stream applications filed in British Columbia. The government should ensure that these requests are legitimate and that we do not have talent here in Canada that will be able to fill these openings. While at the same time, programs like the Canadian Startup Visa are right in spirit, but effectively not capturing international entrepreneurs and having them come to Canada. As the government is considering renewal of this program, it is important to understand what structural reform is needed in order to make it successful. The Council of Canadian Innovators recommends a two-stage hybrid model where successful applications are first moved through the temporary residency with a clear pathway to permanent residency if they meet measured business outcomes. This would move the program away from the rigid upfront requirements and allow IRCC to process applications faster and help prevent the significant backlog that has undermined the program to date. Canada should also look at tax policy as part of its immigration strategy. Canada has a missing province of nearly 850,000 Canadians that live in the United States, many of whom are leaders in business, technology, and industry. We should be competitive. We should be just as ambitious as the United States when it comes to attracting the world's best and brightest minds, while also retaining our minds here in Canada. Canada should introduce a tax incentive that is modeled on America's Qualified Small Business Stock Exception. This tool helps incentivize entrepreneurs as well as bring capital into Canada. Canada's immigration system and our talent has a strong foundation, but the challenge now is how do we protect it and how do we use the tools that we have at our disposal to sharpen and help Canadian firms that need highly skilled individuals come to Canada so these companies can scale, compete, and ultimately compete globally. And with that, I'd like to thank you. I look forward to your questions.
You should become a politician, Mr. Perry. That was almost right on the dot for 5 minutes. So excellent job. So with that, we then move to, so thanks to both for the opening remarks. Now we are going to move to our rounds of questions. And we are going to begin with...
Did we miss one witness for opening remarks?
No, we did not miss one. No, there were just two groups and three people. So now we're going to begin with Mr. Seaback, you are going to begin with you for 6 minutes. Your time begins now.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Terry, it's great to see you again. I want to pick up on some of your comments that you were talking about with temporary foreign workers. One of the things that I came across is that in 2018, so up till 2018, through the LMIA process, there was union consultation through the TFW process. And this Liberal government canceled that and removed that safeguard in 2018. I've asked both the Minister of Immigration and the Minister of Jobs if they think there's been negative consequences because of that, and they didn't answer. So I'm going to put that question to you, but also ask you, do you think it should be reinstated? I've asked the ministers that, and they didn't respond to that.
First of all, it's great to see you again as well, Kyle. And yes, I think it should be reinstated. I remember back in the days, because I've been around now in this position for 9 years in Alberta and 12 years in Saskatchewan, when our union affiliates used to be contacted, I wouldn't say on a weekly basis, but almost on a monthly basis, asking the questions on what's the labor supply look like, and asking if there was a need for temporary foreign workers in certain fields. And sometimes it would be needed, and other times it isn't needed, because there is contractors that would rather bring in temporary foreign workers than utilize Canadians, because sometimes, I'm not saying always, but sometimes they can be abused and be mistreated or not paid the correct rates out there as well. So when we're being consulted, we could actually talk with the government and say, listen, there's this employer out there that's doing this, or, we need more iron workers, or we need more pipe fitters, or we need more electricians, or we don't need them. We may have, 2,000 electricians sitting on the board currently. And you know what? We do have those connections right across Canada. With the building trades, we are connected right throughout the country. So if we have people working in Alberta, we can go and look into Saskatchewan or British Columbia or Nova Scotia. Over the last decade, we've brought in thousands, tens of thousands of people from across the country to help us on projects so that the Canadian economy is moving forward. So thank you, Kyle.
So one of the things I did a little bit digging actually, and what I discovered was in 2025, there were 127,000 Canadians with trade certificates that were unemployed. But at the same time, 126,000 temporary foreign workers came into Canada in Tier 0 to 3, which includes skilled trades. It seems to me like this is illustrative of the problem, and I've suggested that the government might want to conduct an investigation into that. Do you find those numbers sort of going with what your experience has been, that this program is being abused by employers to, get low-wage labor?
Yes, I do. I've been talking to some tradespeople out there in the last year. Some of them may have only worked 8 to 12 weeks out of the year, which is unacceptable for, let's say, some pipe fitters out there that have given me that example. And when we're bringing in temporary foreign workers, it should not be occurring. We should make sure that Canadians are working first and foremost, and then utilize young Canadians, new Canadians coming that have already been coming to the country, and also women in the trades. There's so much opportunity that we need to grow our domestic pool of labor and help them first and foremost before we start looking to bring in temporary foreign workers to displace our membership or Canadians.
The final sort of part to this puzzle that I've discovered and is the actual the illegal work that's taking place on construction sites. In fact, my understanding is that on some construction projects in Alberta that are receiving federal tax dollars to fund that project, there's illegal labor working on those projects. I wonder if you could comment on that, and what do you think the government needs to do to prevent this from happening in the future?
Well, one of the things is we actually, get undocumented workers or TFWs that have moved over from the agriculture sector into the construction sector, coming into our office, sometimes in large groups of 20 or 30, because they feel more comfortable talking to us. And they are working, not always, but sometimes, on government-funded projects. And sometimes they're getting paid cash, because what's happening is one contractor will get the work, then subcontract it to another contractor. That subcontractor subcontracts it off again. And the actual general contractor doesn't even know who is actually on that site properly. And then we're actually seeing fake documents, fake Red Seal tickets coming in, fake safety certificates also appearing. And sometimes they are being utilized, that there are members that they say are on that job, and they're not on that job. Someone else has taken their identity and posing as them, and then getting paid cash under the table to be working on construction sites right across Alberta. And this is not just a one-off. We are seeing this in thousands of undocumented workers working in Edmonton and in Calgary. And this is just one example that's happening in Alberta here. It's happening right across the country, where this illegal workforce is moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Seaback. Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Now we have 6 minutes for Mr. Chang. Your 6 minutes starts now.
Let's come back to the study on global talent. So my questions are for Mr. Perry and Mr. Carbonell. So what are the biggest barriers related to credential recognition, work authorization, and talent mobility, and how can the federal government address them?
Sure. So I'll just speak to a little bit of what we kind of deal with more on a day-to-day basis, which, to recap a little bit what my colleague was saying, we represent 175 companies that are scaling, Canadian headquarter technology companies. And the way we tend to analyze this is that they face 4 principal barriers to scale: access to talent, capital, customers, and the right marketplace frameworks. When it comes to talent, we see immigration and skilled immigration as a really useful part of filling the gaps that otherwise occur in, the reality that these are usually highly, highly technical fields where the amount of research personnel, engineering personnel, is quite small by global standards. And to give a bit of a sense of perspective, I always like this stat: the Chinese university system graduates 6 million people a year, which is, by Canadian or American or any other standards, really, really tremendous. So not to say that everyone's hiring from China, but just to say that the amount of advanced engineering and research grads coming from outside of Canada is much higher than the ones inside of Canada. So the Global Talent Stream is a system that a lot of our members use that's worked quite well for them. That helps them identify, or they identify the talent they need, and they're able to, within a very short amount of time, in a trusted framework, bring those folks to Canada. There's, of course, teething issues, as there always is with any program, but this is a program that we feel very, very strongly works for Canada and for the interests of growing and scaling Canadian companies here. As my colleague Daniel said, this isn't about displacing Canadian jobs. This is about scaling companies that are going to create more jobs in Canada for Canadians down the line. So I just want to speak to the real centrality and utility of that tool to fill this specific need. On your specific questions about credentials recognition, I would say it's not an issue that we've heard crop up a lot in this specific context, but I'd be very happy to check back with our membership and see if this is an issue that's occurred for them.
Thank you. And my riding of Burnaby Central is home to BCIT and a thriving clean technology ecosystem. How can the federal immigration policy better support emerging sectors like AI, clean technology, and advanced manufacturing?
Yeah, do you mind if I take this? Yeah, great question. So for, I think first of all, keeping programs like the Global Talent Stream in operation is really essential. And I'm not deaf. I'm watching the conversation about the TFW program nationally, and of course, I have my personal views. I do think it would be a real tragedy if this particular program, the Global Talent Stream, were a casualty of broader backlash against the temporary foreign worker program, which I don't want to comment on more broadly than that. So certainly that would be keep that channel open. It's a in the grand scheme of things a quite small component, as Daniel was saying, 2.6% overall. I think that translates to about 32,000 over the last 10 odd years, not a huge number, but these are all really, really critical folks at the end of the day, folks that really enable companies to take that leap to the next level, who are going to unlock some kind of technological or industrial barrier for them. So we think certainly that program is really critical. Daniel mentioned two others, and certainly the startup visa program is one that we saw the rollout of that as quite troubled initially, and there was a clear reason for that, which is that it was initially tied to permanent residency. So you're creating a very, very high reward essentially for this program. So the amount of scrutiny that went into applications ensured that it was going to be a very, very slow process and didn't really meet the standards of similar global programs, such that Canada wasn't really competitive. So what we've proposed is to say, keep that program, reform it a bit, make it so that it is a temporary status at first, with a pathway to permanent residency tied to outcomes. I think that would solve a lot of these issues, keep the backlog to a much more manageable level and manageable volume of applications, and help attract more talent to Canada that are going to be building businesses in these advanced industries.
Thank you. And to what extent does Canada's commitment to diversity and to LGBTQIA+ inclusion influence the decisions of highly skilled workers when they choose where to live, work, or innovate?
That's a great question. I don't know that I can speak to it incredibly precisely, but I will say that for a lot of our members, Canada is a place where folks want to come. It is an incentive for them to be able to say we're a Canadian company operating in Canada. It's a plus. So to the extent to which Canada has a great global brand, let's keep that up. I certainly think a lot of work to do. Or this is Parliament. We have a lot of work to do on lots of things to make sure that that's the case for our kids and grandkids. But certainly that's an asset, and we see it that way.
Okay, so I guess my final question to you would be, Canada compete globally for highly skilled talents, and where are we succeeding and where are we falling behind?
For sure, that's a fantastic question. So we're doing quite well attracting, and historically have done quite well attracting research talent, which I think is wonderful. To some level, as I've described through the Global Talent Stream and other streams, engineering and research talent, that's more commercial rather than research and the post-secondary system. Where I think we have more difficulty is really keeping industrialists here, and that's you look at the stats around the amount of grads from Canadian universities that leave to go work in the U.S., the Bay Area. it's quite high, especially ones from top schools. That's a real brain drain that I think Canada just simply cannot afford over the long term. If you look at the composition of, people talk a lot about the U.S.-Canada productivity and GDP per capita gap. If you look at those stats in really quite close detail, the vast majority of that gap is made up at the top 10% of the income distribution, which is to say that the U.S. economy in this new intangible, data-driven economy that we live in is being driven by a small number of companies that are generating huge, huge economic returns for the country. And Canada doesn't have enough of those, which is, our job to solve to some extent. And our job to help
Thank you,
solve.
Mr. Carbonneau, and thank you, Mr. Chang. That's a great exchange. Maintenant, Monsieur Beaulieu, c'est ton tour.
Mr. Beaulieu, it's your turn. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, the Bloc Québécois would like to remind you that the recognition of credentials is the only jurisdiction of the provinces. In 1991, by signing this agreement, Quebec indicated that it would have full jurisdiction in choosing the economic immigrants. The role of the federal government consists in the final check of the eligibility and awarding permanent residency. So for the Canadian Council of Innovators, I would like to know this. Have you seen any situation where asylum seekers or refugees qualify in technology and engineering, remain underemployed due to the delays in recognizing their credentials? Thank you for that question. Honestly, I have never heard speak of such a case as part of our membership.
Such cases among our membership, but it's not something I've heard of to this point.
So, for instance, if Quebec could grant permanent residency and would also be able to control the last check for eligibility, do you think that it would be possible to more quickly recognize credentials and then have more talents come in?
Are companies getting the talent they need when they need it? As Daniel was saying, this is often an existential question for them. I'm open-minded about whatever system can make that happen, and I think we have lots of companies in Quebec who are very proud to be there and very proud to be based, all over the province. So, to the extent to which I think we can have a conversation around, is that the best tool to make sure that these companies are getting the talent they need when they need it? Very happy to have that conversation. I would say agnostic on the question, but very happy to, have that conversation at greater length.
Bon. Puis à votre niveau, vous avez...
So at your level, you've never seen any asylum seekers or highly skilled workers who find it difficult to find a job because of the credentials recognition?
C'est bon. Donc,
If not, in your view, what changes to the existing programs would be most likely to yield results?
Startup visa in particular, which I think is where we have seen more difficulties. From what we hear, the Global Talent Stream works reasonably well most of the time. I accept that government programs are never going to be batting a thousand, so that's okay. We can always do a bit better. On the startup visa, I do think there was a serious problem where demand greatly outstripped IRCC's capacity to actually analyze those applications. And I think, as I mentioned, that's very much a consequence of it being tied to permanent residency. In a situation where that isn't the case, I think you're going to see a much more measured uptake and a much more realistic uptake for IRCC to manage and also for us to process. So that would be, if I have a granular suggestion, it would be that. I think that would be a huge improvement to the program. It would actually help us bring entrepreneurs here who then may very well choose to make their life in Canada, but we could actually get them through the door first.
c'est peut-être une question pour...
This might be a question for Mr. Terry Parker. You mentioned that, yes, that's fine to have temporary foreign workers, but only during periods where there's a lack of resources. So in your view, is what is taking place, or are there too many temporary foreign workers? Have you seen any temporary foreign workers whose credentials recognition should be less of an issue, but how do you see the situation?
We see temporary foreign workers on construction sites on a daily basis. But what we're seeing, like I said, is a little bit more of the undocumented workers that are coming in through illegal means as well into Alberta. We are looking for more oversight so that we know that everyone is being monitored and followed out there so that people are not being mistreated. People are getting paid the fair rates of pay and protected out there. We want to see, we're not against bringing in new Canadians. What we want to see is making sure that everything is documented and being done above board, and that everyone is treated fairly throughout the construction industry. But right across the Canada,
Il
when I was
reste une
talking to my
minute.
when I
1
was
minute.
when I was talking to my counterparts today, it's happening from BC right across to the Maritimes. We are seeing misuse of the temporary foreign worker program. Thank you.
C'est bon. Est-ce que vous avez déjà observé quelque chose?
Have you already observed something like the phenomenon of the truckers, that is low-cost truckers, where permits, where bogus driving permits are handed out, which gives rise to all kinds of problems, such as dangerous driving on the roads? Have you ever seen this particular phenomenon in your industry?
We've seen something similar to that where people are coming to sites with cards, safety credentials that were not actually issued by a safety provider, that they're forgeries, and we're seeing forgeries happen. And we've actually seen forgeries happen for the Red Seal tickets as well for some of the trades. It doesn't happen all the time, but we are seeing that on some of the major industrial sites across Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Merci, Monsieur Beaulieu. Okay, now we
Thank you,
begin,
Mr. Beaulieu.
which is for 5 minutes. Mr. Ho, we begin with you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first set of questions are for Mr. Terry Parker. So your organization warned that the temporary foreign worker program and the use of undocumented foreign workers, sometimes even workers using fraudulent documents, has contributed to wage suppression in the trades, descaling of trades work, and weaker workplace protections. And those are some pretty serious warnings. So could you share with this committee some stories that you're hearing on the ground?
I'll share one situation where we actually had a number of people coming in from South America. If I'm not mistaken, it was Colombia, coming to work in the country. They came in on tourist visas to work in Alberta. They came into tourist visas pretending to be tourists and then working in Alberta. One of those individuals actually got hurt, came to our office, and he twisted his arm or cut his arm in some way. And he was sitting in a hotel room. Finally, the employer didn't want to deal with it because he doesn't have workers' compensation. They decided to ship this individual back. We later heard that he actually lost his arm because of a workplace injury that was not treated, because the employer did not want the individual going to a hospital, did not want to report to workers' compensation, and decided the best thing to do was ship this individual out of the country. Now, this is an extreme situation, but there is individuals that get hurt on job sites throughout the year, and some of them are undocumented. Some of them are temporary foreign workers that are not legally supposed to be working in the construction industry that do get hurt on these sites. So there is these types of stories that we do hear, and that situation, we are hearing it directly from the individual as well. So it's not third party that we're hearing it. It was directly from the individual.
This is pretty damning. And so when employers can access cheap temporary and foreign labor, and sometimes even access to undocumented workers or foreign workers using fake documentation, does that reduce pressure to raise wages and reduce incentives to hire Canadians?
It definitely does. When our contractors are competing with other contractors that are charging half or a third less than our contractors, it's obviously going to go to that contractor that is charging less, that is using undocumented or inappropriate temporary foreign workers.
Yeah, well, it's very troubling to hear, and from the stories from the ground. And the Liberals' latest press release from their costly credit card budget is that they are, quote, investing in skilled trades. Is there a contradiction in telling young Canadians to pursue the trades, all the while simultaneously allowing employers to bypass them through temporary and sometimes even illegal labor streams?
Well, the Building Trades of Alberta is investing, the government is investing in trying to bring in more apprentices. We see a lot of retirees, retirements happening. We see a lot of projects that are proposed to happen in the future. Now, we are obviously projecting. However, the current situation, there's not as much work as expected currently, and we want the situation to get better. We want to get more young Canadians working in the trades. We want to get more Indigenous people. We want to see more women. We want to see even more new Canadians, obviously, working in the construction industry, but that's not the current situation. Sure, we need to train, but the system is balanced for when the work happens. Then we'll be able to bring more people in. We need more jobs in the construction sector before we start bringing more people into the construction sector. So yes, we need to invest in it, but we have to do it scalable as well.
1 minute.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple concept to put Canadians first. So my next set of questions are for Mr. Perry and Mr. Carbonneau. So this Liberal government keeps using the words like talent attraction, but what we've seen is the Liberals flood our economy with low-skilled labor in recent years. Are you confident there's enough safeguards in place to ensure that employers who use the immigration streams that attract high-skilled workers have adequately exhausted their search for Canadian workers before resorting to foreign skilled labor, especially companies that are headquartered elsewhere?
30 seconds.
Yeah, certainly. I'll take that really quickly. I would say, in general, we are broadly satisfied with the state of the global talent stream. I would say, from a broader economic perspective, it definitely does hurt to have, Amazon and others be very, very heavy users of these programs. I think, especially when we're competing globally on talent, it doesn't seem like the federal government should be putting its thumb on the scale for others.
Do you think Canadian-owned companies and Canadian headquartered companies should have priority?
I definitely think so, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ho. Thank you, Mr. Carbonneau. Next, we have 5 minutes for Ms. Sodi.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. My first question is for you, Mr. Parker. As Canada's new government works to invest in major infrastructure projects across the country to ultimately grow a stronger economy, what recommendations do you have in terms of how Canada's immigration system can better complement federal investments in apprenticeships and domestic training to ensure that we have the workforce necessary to build these major projects?
We want to see the investment happening in young people. We want to see the investment happening in Canadians, but there needs to be oversight. There needs to be audits happening, monitoring of the system currently. We don't need to be bringing temporary foreign workers when we have high unemployment rates amongst young people and amongst Canadians. We need to be focusing, and we need to build Canada. There's no question about that. But we need to do this in a balanced approach.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. I'll go to Mr. Perry or Mr. Carbonneau, whoever would like to answer, since you guys are from the same organization. But you had mentioned in your opening remarks that around 70% of Canadian tech businesses cite a shortage of skilled workers as a major barrier to their success. What does that mean in practical terms for Canadian startups and scale-ups trying to compete globally? And I guess the part 2 of that question is, what opportunities are being lost because these positions can't be filled?
You are right. That is one of the challenges that our members face, is finding the right talent at the right time. When they're unable to access it, what happens is they simply leave. When you can't find the right people to build your business, you take your business elsewhere where they have the environment to allow you to be able to build and be successful. I will say the Global Talent Stream has been a very useful tool in that, to not only just find highly skilled individuals, but also get them through the immigration process in a timely manner where they're able to contribute. We recently saw someone that was successful in hiring another software developer, and that's allowing them to scale here. They've been able to increase the revenue, and they've been able to hire more Canadians. So it really does have a positive effect.
And do you believe there are any key lessons that I guess the government can take from the global talent stream that should I guess, affect and inform the overall talent attraction strategy that we have?
Definitely. I think what we see is very successful in the global talent stream is the referral partners. And that is something we recommend for the startup visa is to allow incubators, venture capital, and others that are in the ecosystem to be more integrated into the process. So as it currently stands right now, IRCC is the one that are reviewing all the applications. And with respect to the IRCC, they do many things very well. But understanding how business works and what innovation looks like and what will succeed is not one that's always top on the list. So by having private sectors to come in and work with them, that will take a little bit off the plate of IRCC, combined with our other recommendations of temporary residency and moving that pathward forward would help reduce the burden on the system.
Okay. In your opening remarks, you also noted that approximately 850,000 Canadians live in the United States, including businesses, technical, and industrial leaders. You've also suggested business stock exemption to encourage. You've also suggested that Canada should consider a tax exemption modeled on the U.S. qualified small business stock exemption. That's a mouthful. Why do you believe a similar measure would benefit Canada's innovation economy?
Sure, great question. So, I mentioned the missing province, and I'll give you some personal background here. I grew up in the U.S. I'm Canadian by birth and chose to come back here. But the reality is that, lots of Canadians see, huge opportunities south of the border. And the reality is that we are in a, competition for talent with them, each and every day. And I think that is a lot of Canadians who've chosen to, and we can't blame them and can't, think that that's a bad move for them. But they think they see more opportunity for themselves on that side of the border than this one. I think we need to basically see how can we be as attractive as the U.S. as a baseline for folks who are entrepreneurial, want to work hard, want to invest in Canada, want to build businesses here, and really how should we be making ourselves a better place to grow and scale a business than the U.S. is. I think needs to be absolutely at the heart of how we approach really any serious conversation around talent.
Okay. And how would you respond to the concerns that this proposal could disproportionately benefit founders and investors rather than the broader workforce?
I think that folks who are founders and investors are putting a lot of skin in the game. And as I mentioned, we have to see the competition with the U.S. as our baseline and the water we're swimming in. And if we aren't really taking that seriously, we're going to lose out on a generation of entrepreneurial talent. And it's a huge loss for us economically, especially when data-driven and IP-driven businesses generate such huge returns for their home economies.
Thank you, Ms. Sodi. Thank you, Mr. Carbonneau. Maintenant, on a 2 minutes et demie pour Ms.
2.5 minutes now for Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you. My question is for you. Do you believe that the issue with highly skilled labor is more an issue of recruitment or of retention? That's an excellent question. I think we have both of those dimensions. Certainly, we have an issue in recruitment nationally. As I said, usually when you look at all of the research domains and subspecialized domains like engineering, etc., certainly we don't have the graduates here in Canada to fill in all of the labor shortages across the country. I don't think that's really achievable, and I think we need to look elsewhere. But also the fact is that we're losing a lot of Canadians, but also people who are mid-career, end of career, who will go to the United States or elsewhere because they see more attractive conditions there. So it really is those two sides. We do believe that it's a very serious issue. And I've said the comparison with the United States is often not fair, but it is the comparison that people see every day when they make a choice either to live here or to go there. So recruitment really has to be done by the actual companies. How can the federal government assist in improving recruitment? Well, again, very good question. What we've seen is the Global Talent Stream. That is a program that works quite well. It isn't always perfect, and sometimes we've seen cases of researchers or engineering practitioners who wait a long time for the government to approve their application. It does happen. It isn't very frequent, but usually if this program were to work at 100%, that would really be an asset for Canada. Thank you. Do I have a little bit of time left? A question for Mr. Parker. You said that the temporary foreign workers work with fake documents. What would be the best means of countering that problem? 20 seconds.
The best means of countering that problem is to have a universal safety standards right across the country. And that way it would be that we could actually prove it, because what's happening right now is you're having different safety companies from different provinces all producing different tickets that are supposed to be enforced. However, there's no global or Canadian authentication on safety standards. On the Red Seal, it is. And when we saw a fake Red Seal ticket come through, we knew right away that it was fake. What we need to do is we need to do a universal safety standards for all of Canada, and that would help that situation.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and merci, Monsieur Beaulieu. Next, we have 5
Thank you,
minutes.
Mr. Beaulieu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Carbonneau, Mr. Perry, I want to dig in a bit to this SUV program. You've mentioned it a few times today. You mentioned in your comments that the program has rigid upfront requirements. Can you elaborate on that briefly?
Is that the startup visa?
Yes.
Yeah. So essentially, the problem with the startup visa, as I've kind of hinted at, is that because what we've set up a pathway to permanent residency right off the bat, you're creating a huge incentive for people to apply, even if they don't really meet the requirements, right? So that requires then. I see you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, well, they have to meet the requirements because they go through designated organizations or incubators.
Indeed.
Or angel investment funds where the due diligence is done and
Yes.
letters of support are granted.
Indeed.
So when you say that, I'm not trying to get the words that you said, but they go through due diligence
Yes.
before they come to Canada. So
Yes.
while it is a pathway to residency, they have determined to a large degree the commercial viability of their concepts. Correct?
Yes. What we heard from folks in the ecosystem to be clear, our members are usually more established companies and they aren't availing themselves of this directly. What we heard from the ecosystem is that the backlog at IRCC that this program generated basically made it unworkable.
Backlog a result of too many qualified companies, or IRCC not being able to go through the application process, or were there other problems, for example, designated organizations who were effectively selling letters of support?
I think without having any evidence of option C, I would probably point to option B. As I think they just didn't have the capacity and they were applying very strict scrutiny standards because of what was on offer. I take your point around the organizations. I haven't heard any allegations to that effect. I think, what was that, sorry?
I've heard lots.
But yes, it's a very good question.
So you also recommended that your solution would be temporary status at first. Yeah. But temporary status, how is somebody going to dedicate the amount of capital? Who's going to invest in a company that comes to Canada that has only got temporary status? Me as an investor in the startup ecosystem, the last place I would put my money is in a company that doesn't have status. Yeah.
No, it's a fair question. I think if the choice is between having a program that's non-functional and a program where there are some trade-offs, I'd rather have the trade-offs. I do think if you create a window that's workable, these are solvable problems, but I just think that what we saw in the first kind of iteration of this program wasn't really functional.
Okay, but look, again, I'm not so sure that the iteration was dysfunctional as it became problematic for organizations that were doing due diligence outside of IRCC. So IRCC didn't have any role other than approving designated organizations or angel funds or incubators. So the program itself is fine. It's just the bulk of a massive amount of companies that were coming to Canada. Now, the bigger issue now is we've got a 10-year backlog. If you go to the IRCC website now, it says 10-year wait for startup visa. I mean, who's going to come to Canada? Who's even going to consider coming to Canada when they know right up front that that's a 10-year wait?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's totally unworkable. And frankly, I think you should have done the startup at that point if you're going to be waiting 10 years anyway. But no, I completely hear you. That's exactly the concern we're worried about as well.
So one of the other comments you made about retaining talent in Canada, and I agree with you completely. One of the biggest problems we have is the exodus of our brightest and best that go. I mean, people go to where capital is, and our biggest problem, in my view, in Canada is that we have failed to provide adequate access to capital to commercialize startups and innovative companies. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with that. I mentioned earlier that Canada's really good at attracting, researchers and really bright people kind of in the commercial space and in the research, post-secondary space. All true. We really do struggle to grow these companies, right? And I think that that's a huge problem for our ecosystem. Canada, I think we like to tell ourselves the myth that we punch above our weight. I think in lots of real ways we punch below our weight. We have so many smart people, and what we can accomplish with those smart people is a lot less than it should be. And I think our access to capital problem is a huge part of that.
So do you have a suggested solution to that? Because I know I don't have a lot of time, but look, capital is the biggest pain point here in Canada.
Yeah.
What would you recommend we do as a government or as a society or as investors?
How much time do I have?
Seconds.
Oh boy, okay. I will say we had a really great report out last year called A Mandate to Innovate that addressed kind of these big four issues that we talk about, and I would refer you to that, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about it.
I'd also say feel free to follow up with a letter with suggestions to Mr. Davies' question. I think it's an excellent one.
We can certainly do that as well.
It'll help us get
Thank
to
you,
some
Mr.
of the
Davies.
answers we're looking for. Maintenant, Madame Lapointe, c'est ton tour. Tu as 10.
Ms. Lapointe, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and welcome to all of our witnesses. I'm very pleased to be able to replace a colleague today. Earlier, Mr. Carbonneau, you referred to the foreign temporary workers, and you spoke about 2.6%. Did I understand that number correctly? Yes. Could you perhaps explain what that number means for you?
Labor market impact assessments out of the whole TFW program that the Global Talent Stream represents.
OK, merci. Et selon vous, ce programme-là,
So in your mind, what does this program represent for the overall Canadian economy?
For a short time, these are probably the best people in the world to come do those jobs, in the sense that they are helping Canadian companies scale, to grow, to launch their operations and export abroad, do research, and hire more Canadians ultimately here and create more long-term economic growth.
merci. Tantôt, vous m'avez
Thank you. Earlier, you surprised me a bit when you said that compared to the United States, especially for these very high-skilled workers, you said that's as if they were more attracted by the United States than by Canada, knowing what is taking place currently south of the border. That is not what I've heard. Could you explain to me what we need to change? That is, south of the border, we've all heard this. But when you mention that, could you explain to us a bit more why, what it is, we should do to retain that talent? Yes, absolutely. Look, I grew up in the United States. My parents still live there. In fact, I have one parent is coming back here this year because of the reasons that you hinted at, in fact. But to say,
In the world, the richest consumer market in the world, the best universities, et cetera. I could go on, right? The deepest capital markets. We have great universities, don't get me wrong. But it's the density matters, right? And I think when we talk about talent and we're not taking seriously the reality that there is a very, very, very rich country right next to us that takes this very, very seriously. If the United States of America can be said to have had an industrial policy for the last 50, 60 years, it's that they have very, very wisely said, if we take the world's best and brightest and give them the opportunity to build what they want, the rest will solve itself. Do they still have problems? Yes, they do. However, I do think we have to take very seriously the notion that we are competing with a country that takes the attraction of the world's best and brightest as a very, very high priority. I think we're very quick to congratulate ourselves sometimes on how nice it is to be Canadian, to live in Canada. Hey, I love it here. I live here. But I do think that, when people have the pick of the litter, when they're the best minds and they can write their ticket anywhere they want, are they going to pick Canada every time? Many people do. In fact, like when we talk to our companies all the time and we ask them, why are you building in Canada? It would be, people ask them all the time, not just us, it would be easier to do elsewhere. They say, yeah, but it's important for me to do that here because my family's here. I care about my community. I care about my ecosystem. And that's great. That's a laudable sentiment. I'm really glad they do it. But what I want the answer to be is, this is the best place on earth for me to actually grow my business and to grow it into what I want it to be, which is a global enterprise that employs thousands of people and creates tons of jobs. So that's to me, that's where we're not quite getting the conversation.
Merci beaucoup pour vos précisions. Je vais prendre un angle du Québec.
Thank you for the clarification. Again, I'll speak about Quebec as my colleague did. You know that we have major universities in the Montreal and Quebec City areas. We attract talent. We have to retain that talent. Artificial intelligence and the aerospace industry is mainly in the Montreal area. Are there issues or differences that we have to address when it comes to our immigration system, taking into account Quebec? That's a good question.
And see if there's anything specific that they've heard. I have not heard necessarily anything to indicate that there's any Quebec-specific difficulties on talent attraction. I will say, certainly...
Il reste une minute.
1 minute? Okay. Certainly we heard that in the context of the recent changes to the language laws, which I think most people appreciate. French is the language of business in Quebec, and that's not a problem. The changes recently, I think, did sort of create a bit of a chill for people looking at their options from outside of the province to say, "Oh, this seems complicated," and they're not. It's not. You're never going to see that statistic anywhere, right? Of people who have looked at that situation and decided they didn't want to deal with it. But it is real, and we do hear about that. That it does affect investment decisions. It affects people's relocation decisions, all kinds of things. And once again, I really want to underline the respect for the fact of French as the language of business in Quebec. Totally the case, and I wouldn't want it otherwise. But it is, just a reality that we do deal with.
On peut attirer les Français et les Belges et l'Afrique.
We could attract the French, the Belgians, and people from Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carbonneau. Now we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to give a minute and a half to Mr. Menegakis and a minute and a half to Mr. Fragiskatos. Mr. Menegakis, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Parker, do you believe the temporary foreign worker program has been used by employers to avoid raising wages and invest in training Canadian tradespeople?
Yes, I do.
You
Simple. We have lots of apprentices that are willing to go to work. I have lists and lists of people that are interested to go into the trades on a daily, like any day of the week. I could pull, hundreds that would like to get involved in the trades, yet they can't get involved in the trades because there's misuses happening out there in the system. There's not enough work for all of these individuals to go to work, and it's this competition that's happening that is undermining our system.
We see youth unemployment is spiking. Are there young Canadians who want to enter the trades but are being crowded out because employers would rather access temporary foreign labor than invest in training them?
We have roughly, I think 16 to 17% in Alberta youth unemployment currently. That's unacceptable. We need to put Canadians first.
Do you believe one of the many reasons we see seeing high youth unemployment is that employers stopped investing in Canadians the moment the government handed them a cheaper labor pipeline?
I'm not saying that it is the sole cause of it. However, when an employer is faced with getting labor for half the price, they sometimes take that option of finding ways to lower their costs to increase profit. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Thank you, Mr. Menegakis. Mr. Fragiskatos, 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all witnesses for being here today. I have 1 minute, so I'm going to direct my questions to Mr. Carbonneau, or Mr. Perry if he wishes. Is the relative challenge that we have, the youth unemployment issue that was just mentioned, is this caused by the temporary foreign worker program?
I'm not a macroeconomist, so I don't think I know enough to say on the broader question there.
Okay. Staying with that issue, can you repeat, if I take your main point to be that the program is an important program for the Canadian economy, there are reforms that are needed. You mentioned the example of Amazon. I would agree with that, and we can think of other companies that are engaged in practices that would be inappropriate from the perspective of most Canadians. But those calls that we sometimes hear from friends in the opposition to cancel the program outright, what do you think of that?
As I mentioned, I can only really speak for the Global Talent Stream. I think that program is really, really valuable. I certainly, and I think we've talked around it a little bit. I think there are certainly issues with the temporary foreign worker program. I think I don't know enough about it to say at the super high level. what should be done, but I can tell you with great certainty that the global talent stream would be an absolute tragedy to lose if it were to be lost.
I think they want to get rid of that as well. So thank you very much for putting on the record a very reasonable point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fragiscatos. Thank you, Mr. Carbonneau. Before I thank you formally, I know that there's some follow-up that from the question that Mr. Davies has asked, if I could just put that on the record. Also, you had mentioned you represent 175 companies. If you happen to have the data of the skill and labor needs they might have, that might actually be helpful to this committee as we're looking on how to actually identify that. And the last thing is you were talking about how it's hard to keep industrialists here in Canada. Be good for you to define that a little bit. It'll help us a little bit in terms of identifying the solutions. So with that, je tiens à remercier les témoins d'aujourd'hui.
I'd like to thank today's witnesses.
We are now going to suspend for about 5 to 10 minutes so that the current witnesses can leave, and then we can get back with the second panel of witnesses. Thank you. So welcome back to the second panel of today's meeting. It's nice to see that everybody's here with us in person. It's always a pleasure to welcome everyone, but it's always nice to have people in the room. So, as I did before, I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of our new witnesses. Kindly wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. If you would like to listen to the different languages, please make sure you're selecting it before you get started. And let me see if there's anything else. And just a final reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. So now I would like to formally welcome our witnesses for the second panel. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue à nos témoins.
I would now like to welcome our witnesses.
Miranda, welcome. From the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, we have Michael Casola, Senior Resettlement and Complementary Pathways Officer. Welcome. Sandra Elgersma, Resettlement and Complementary Pathways Officer, Durable Solutions, Labor Mobility. Great title. Welcome. And then from the World University Service of Canada, we have Mr. Steve Mason, Chief Executive Officer. Such a pleasure to welcome, warmly welcome all of you. You will have, each organization will have up to 5 minutes each. We're going to begin with Mr. Miranda, and your 5 minutes begins now.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci au comité.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for having invited me.
Software engineer from Scarborough in the East End of Toronto. I graduated from the University of Western Ontario in June 2024. After graduating, I spent almost 2 years unemployed. In that time, I applied to over 500 positions and spent countless hours going through the interview process at various companies, rarely even receiving the courtesy of a rejection letter. All I was able to get was a volunteer part-time position as a software engineer at a Vancouver-based charity and a 20-hour-a-week position at a small tech startup. I only successfully found full-time employment when I shifted my focus away from software engineering. My story is not unique. Since graduating, I have personally spoken to dozens of other recent graduates in software engineering and computer science who are struggling to find employment, many of them for extended periods of time due to a lack of entry-level positions in tech. My experience led me to ask a simple question. If highly educated Canadian graduates cannot find a pathway into the tech industry, how will Canada develop the experienced workforce it needs in the future? If Canadian graduates are unable to gain that experience at home, many may look elsewhere for opportunities, resulting in a potential loss of talent that Canada has already invested heavily in educating. As such, I am here today to express my concern that efforts to attract highly skilled tech talent from abroad are not being matched by equivalent efforts to develop Canadian graduates. While it is true that there is a lot of demand for senior tech workers in Canada, particularly in AI, machine learning, data science, cybersecurity, and cloud computing, there is no shortage of talented young Canadian software engineers who are eager and willing to fulfill this demand. The issue is not a lack of talent, but rather a lack of experience and opportunity to gain it. Youth unemployment has risen steadily in the past few years from 9% in June of 2022 to 14.3% in April of 2026. Many of these unemployed young people are graduates in engineering, computer science, and other tech disciplines. According to Indeed's Hiring Lab, postings for junior and standard tech roles in Canada have dropped 25% compared to pre-pandemic levels, while postings for senior and manager roles are above pre-pandemic levels. While this problem is not specific to AI and can be found even in web development and application development, roles tied directly to AI, such as machine learning engineers, data engineers, and data center technicians, continue to show elevated demand. These are areas in which Canadian universities already provide education, but unfortunately are still not accessible to new graduates as they often require years of experience. In fact, even many roles labeled as entry-level require prior experience, effectively removing the first step on the career ladder for new graduates. As a result of this mismatch between entry-level supply and experienced labor demand, efforts to address senior talent shortages entirely through immigration may unintentionally increase competition in the early career job market for Canadian graduates, if not carefully designed. If we flood the market with senior engineers from abroad, then employers have no incentive to hire and train Canadian new grads because they have easy and cheap access to foreign senior engineers who can hit the ground running, as opposed to investing the time and money into training a junior engineer from Canada who may take a few years to ramp up. Canada's skilled immigration policy should complement domestic talent pipelines, not replace them. Every senior engineer, AI specialist, cybersecurity expert, and technology leader began as a junior employee who was given an opportunity. If Canada wants a strong technology sector in 10 years, we must ensure today's graduates have a chance to build the experience right now that future demands will require. I strongly believe Canada can be a global leader in technology, but this cannot come at the expense of an entire generation of Canadian graduates. I respectfully ask that you advocate for policies that incentivize companies to hire and train junior Canadian engineers, invest in graduate upskilling programs in fields like AI and cybersecurity, and ensure that efforts to attract global talent are matched by equally strong investments in developing Canada's domestic talent pipeline. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next, we have 5 minutes for, is it going to be Mr. Casola or, yes. We are going to have 5 minutes for Mr. Casasola. Thank you. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. UNHCR is pleased to appear as part of the committee's study on attracting global talent. Refugees represent an untapped talent pool that Canadian employers have only recently been able to reach thanks to the Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot, or EMPP, introduced in 2018. Providing an additional option for refugees with the commensurate skills to access Canada, UNHCR welcomed the EMPP and looks forward to Canada delivering on its pledge at the Global Refugee Forum to make the EMPP a permanent program. Back in 2018, Canada was a pioneer, testing the extent to which refugees could access permanent economic immigration programs without changing human capital requirements. This testing found that refugees have the skills and experience, but may face barriers related to their displacement, such as the inability to provide a valid passport. The EMPP was designed so that refugees could overcome these barriers and access economic immigration on a level playing field. Thanks to IRCC, NGO partners, and employers, more than 1,300 refugees have immigrated to Canada through the EMPP to date. The key learning has been constant. When given a chance, refugees can compete with other economic immigrants to provide much-needed talent that allows businesses to maintain operations or expand. From the outset, Canada has been clear that refugee labor mobility does not replace resettlement or asylum, but instead offers an additional opportunity for refugees that meet the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act's economic objectives. UNHCR affirms this approach, particularly in the global context of record levels of forced displacement and shrinking solution opportunities for refugees. Creative partnerships with civil society and the private sector are needed, as set out in the Global Compact for Refugees. The private sector is critical to EMPP, as most applications have been anchored with a job offer. We'd like to acknowledge employers such as Glenhaven Manor, St. Joseph's Care Group, Tri-County Mennonite Homes, Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services, Chancellor Parks, Ice River Springs, and IKEO Industries, among many others. These employers have made refugee recruitment an integral part of their international talent strategies, sometimes traveling to refugee camps for recruitment missions. As a result, refugees are on the job in communities such as Pictou County, Nova Scotia, and Thunder Bay, as well as in Canada's major cities. Just like other economic programs, the EMPP needs to work smoothly for employers. We've heard their concerns about processing times and predictability. The EMPP has been affected by limited space in the annual levels plan and inventory of applications, leading to long processing times. While this situation is similar to for other economic immigrant streams, refugees have difficulty meeting the requirements for temporary work permits that would allow them to start work while their permanent resident application is processed. We look forward to learning how IRCC will address this issue, informed by the evaluation of the pilot that is underway. Our own research shows that the EMPP has delivered results. Our surveys found that EMPP alumni have a high rate of staying with their employer and/or sector, and many experience career progression. UNHCR has also organized focus groups with EMPP alumni. What stands out is their drive and eagerness to invest in themselves through ongoing training and upskilling. Alumni expressed gratitude for the opportunity and would recommend immigrating through EMPP to other refugees. Our research also uncovered that those arriving through the EMPP have struggled with credential recognition, just like other economic immigrants. With partners, UNHCR is interested in how these issues could be addressed at a system rather than individual level. The Nova Scotia pharmacy regulators provide a great example. Their Jordan pharmacy licensure pathway fast-tracked the pathway to practice for immigrants trained in Jordan, following a thorough evaluation of the pharmacy education programs, meeting with the government of Jordan, and assessment and recruitment of candidates. The initial cohort recruited through this initiative and now working as pharmacists in Nova Scotia includes 11 refugees and 6 Jordanian nationals. With the EMPP as a permanent program, ideally with faster processing times and significant space, refugee inclusion could be mainstreamed. A reliable immigration pathway could unlock potential. It would allow employers looking for cohorts of skilled refugees to move forward with recruiting or regulators looking for systemic partnerships to proceed confident that the immigration route will facilitate. For our part, UNHCR is confident that the next nurse, roofer, and French immersion teacher in refugee circumstances is just waiting for the opportunity to put their skills to use and in turn help meet Canada's unmet employment needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casasola. Thank you. Next, we have 5 minutes for Mr. Mason. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent WUSC, a global development organization headquartered in Canada, which aims to catalyze positive education and economic opportunities for young people. Since our founding over 100 years ago, we have had a consistent focus on addressing the unique education and economic needs of refugees and displaced people. In Canada, we support refugee resettlement through both education and employment pathways, including through our flagship student refugee program, now in its 48th year. Today, I will focus on our support for labour mobility pathways for skilled refugees to relocate to Canada to strengthen our economy. These are not temporary pathways. All individuals arrive in Canada as permanent residents. I will speak to what we have learned, the opportunities we see, and our recommendations for the government. In brief, our experience has demonstrated that supporting smart, targeted labour mobility for refugee populations is a classic win-win. It enables Canada to fill critical labour gaps while providing a durable solution to refugee populations with few other options. It allows Canada to deliver on the pledges it made at the Global Refugee Forum in 2023 while also strengthening our economy. I'd like to provide 2 examples. First, under the Economic Mobility Pathway pilot, WUSC has been supporting the tourism and hospitality sector in Western Canada to address critical labour shortages by connecting employers with refugee talent. Through consultations with employers, we heard a consistent message. Businesses, in rural and especially in rural and remote communities, struggle to find stable, year-round workers. Resort communities have traditionally relied on temporary labour, but employers emphasize the need for a more consistent workforce to sustain growth in the sector. There has been limited availability and interest of Canadians to fill these roles, leaving persistent gaps in a key economic sector. Since 2020, we have matched more than 100 refugee youth from Kenya and Malawi with tourism and hospitality jobs across BC and Alberta. The results have been significant. Employers report retention rates of over 90% after 1 year, dramatically reducing recruitment and training costs while improving workforce stability and performance. Just to give one example is Ramla, originally from Burundi. She spent years in limbo in refugee camps without access to employment. In 2023, she arrived in Canada and began working as a housekeeper in Tofino. The opportunity gave her financial stability, independence, and a path forward through permanent residency. Within a short time frame, she was promoted to front desk agent. Her employer has become a champion of the MPP, noting that it has created a wealth of benefits for the team, their leaders, and the company as a whole. The second example I'd like to provide is in Nova Scotia, where we are working with provincial regulators, employers, and Dalhousie University to address the critical shortage of pharmacists in the province. We identified a group of trained Syrian pharmacists living as refugees in Jordan and supported the creation of a streamlined licensure pathway to work in Canada. As a result, these professionals moved from arrival to full licensure in approximately 3 months, compared to the typical 2 to 3 year time frame. This demonstrates a simple but powerful point that applies across sectors. It's not the lack of talent that is a problem. It is the alignment of systems, immigration, credential recognition, and labour markets. When those systems work together, labour shortages can be addressed quickly and effectively, and refugee talent becomes a powerful part of Canada's economic strategy. I have 3 recommendations for the government. First, we welcome IRCC's commitment to making the economic mobility pathway a permanent program, while also acknowledging that it needs adjustment in order to function in the reliable manner that employers reasonably require. This includes a commitment to processing permanent residence applications within a 6-month time frame and streamlining the application process by allocating a predetermined number of spaces under the program to trusted partners. This will ensure predictable intake and avoid system delays. My second recommendation is that while EMPP is an important pathway that should be sustained, federal and provincial governments should also ensure that existing immigration pathways are accessible to refugee populations. Working through initiatives like the Provincial Nominee Program or the Francophone Community Immigration Pilot also provides significant potential. For these pathways to work effectively, two conditions are essential: processing times of 6 months or less to build employer confidence, and flexibility on settlement fund requirements, which many refugees cannot meet. Third, we encourage stronger coordination across federal departments whose collaboration would accelerate this work. Global Affairs Canada, ESDC, and the regional development agencies all play a role in necessary systems alignment. There is, for example, a real and pragmatic opportunity to leverage overseas training funded by GAC to support Canadian labour needs. Refugee labour mobility is not a humanitarian initiative. It is a practical economic strategy driven by provincial and employer needs and the skills of talented individuals who just happen to be refugees in need of a fresh start. It is an economic cake with humanitarian icing. Thank you.
Great. With 1 second left to the 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mason. That to all witnesses, excellent presentations. Thank you. We now have our first round of questions, which is question and answers, which is 6 minutes each. And we begin with Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be visiting the Immigration Committee. I serve as our Conservative Shadow Minister for Employment. And my questions are primarily for Mr. Miranda. We have been pursuing this issue for a long time of the metastasizing youth unemployment crisis in this country. As you mentioned, 14.3% is the current youth unemployment figure. I think in many ways that unemployment figure understates the nature of the crisis because we also have declining labor force participation among young people, and we're seeing many instances of young people struggling to find employment in their field. They study in a particular field, and it sounds like this is part of your story as well, and then they study, develop expertise in a particular field, and then eventually they find a job, but it's outside of the field that they trained for. And I do want to say it's so important that you're here, and it's so important, I think, that we hear directly from young people who are affected by this crisis. The nature of how certain groups are represented by sort of coordinated organizations has, I think, led to a dynamic in which we, in particular, haven't heard enough in Parliament from young graduates who are grappling with this issue in real time. So to you, and I think to others who are listening, I'll just say I think we as parliamentarians need to hear more from that perspective. And so often the discussion here shifts to how do we attract talent when I do think many young people that I talk to are asking a different question, which is how do we have the investment and the opportunities to align with the talent that we already have here and the talent that is actually looking for opportunities to put that talent that they have to work, to be given a chance. So I wonder if you have reflections on kind of the state of discourse around this issue and how we need to hear more about having opportunities available for existing talent rather than just the focus on attracting more talent that may compete with existing talent.
Yeah, that's the primary reason why I'm here. All too often in Canada, I think the conversation is about how to attract high-skilled immigrants, and I think that's an important conversation. But an equally important conversation is how can we help young Canadians that are highly skilled, that have degrees in things like engineering, that are struggling to find a job in this job market, especially entry-level positions. So I think that's an important conversation that needs to be had way more, and that's the reason why I'm here.
Yeah, and just on this issue of training versus positions that are available, do you find for yourself and other young people you talk to that there's kind of unmet expectations, like you're encouraged to pursue study in a particular field with expectations that there is work available, and then it's very difficult to find a position in that particular high-skilled field, and you've acquired skills that aren't as labor market relevant as you were initially led to believe?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, especially with software engineering. I was told when I started that I would have a job instantly. And even now when I talk to people who aren't software engineers, especially older people, and I tell them I'm a software engineer, the first thing they say is, you're going to get a job right away, you're going to have no problem. But that's just not the case anymore. And so I think we definitely need to have a conversation about that for sure.
Yeah. So, Canadian Federation of Independent Business recently put out this this really interesting report. It's called "Work in Progress: Bridging the Gap Between Small Businesses and Canada's Youth," and they surveyed young people. They also talked to businesses, and I think it's a really good report for identifying some of these gaps where there are frustrations clearly on the part of small business owners that are struggling to meet their needs. And there's also a lot of frustrations on the part of young people. And one of the things that they identify is that existing government supports for small business to hire youth are often, quote, overly complex and administratively burdensome. Meanwhile, they've called for action that would reduce the costs of hiring, for instance, proposing things like training supports and EI premium relief, so to reduce the cost of hiring. I wonder if you've got an impression about kind of what policy interventions are needed to help close the gap between businesses and young people and to make it easier for businesses to be able to give opportunities to young people.
1 minute.
I'm not sure that I can really speak to particular policies. I'm not a policy expert, but I do think that definitely incentivizing businesses to hire young people and train young people is important because they don't seem to be willing to do that anymore.
Yeah. There's a training cost associated with hiring new workers, and there are other ways we can provide relief to businesses. But basically, we need this to happen in the workplace between businesses and young people, and it comes back to our view that we need to encourage a more competitive economy because businesses are more likely to hire young people if they're optimistic about the future, if they're growing. But it comes back to, if we have a competitive economy, that creates opportunity for existing talent. And the biggest gaps we're seeing right now aren't so much in talent recruitment from abroad, it's in being able to deploy the existing talent that we have in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis, and thank you, Mr. Miranda. That is 6 minutes. Next, we have 6 minutes for... c'est à vous, Monsieur Joseph.
Merci, Madame la
vous avez 6
Présidente.
minutes.
Mr. Joseph, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we have very little time. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here. I would also like to address my question to Mr. Michael Casasola. Canada is often being quoted as a prime destination for refugees, more specifically because of its ability to be able to welcome the refugees and provide humanitarian assistance. So in your mind, which elements of the Canadian system remain exemplary practices internationally?
Canada's integration experience is desired by many other countries. One of the things I've always argued about what Canada does well is that, our background is around refugees. I can't speak to the experience of all immigrants, but I'm sure a similar case can be made, is that while it can be very difficult to start off, the situation gets better and better year over year. And one of the key elements I would think that are part of it are elements not just the programs that are provided and the supports, and as well as the strength of character of these individuals, but as the opportunities for things like permanent residency, the opportunities for citizenship. We have been looking at census data, trying to understand what was the integration experience of refugees. And what we're finding is that refugees are more likely to be working in areas that Canada's needs, such as healthcare, manufacturing, and the trades, that refugees are, on average, tend to be younger than the overall population and are ready to work, that those first 10 years, while I said are difficult, the point is they never plateau. It gets better and better. So within that first 10 years, while their incomes can be quite low, within 10 years, it's increased by 31% and such.
Could you perhaps clarify as well?
I think in our experience, Canada has been a leader in complementary pathways for refugee resettlement, a model that, we at WUSC have been supporting other countries to emulate around the world, specifically both through education pathways and through economic pathways. As Michael said, we have opened up these pathways for refugees to have permanent residence in Canada and to contribute both through the education system and economically. Our experience, we've been running the student refugee program for almost 50 years, and there are thousands of success stories of refugees that came as first-year undergraduate students to Canada and are now pillars of Canadian society and core contributors to our economy.
So you spoke about refugees. I'd like to put a question to you because the High Commissioner for Refugees, and as such, you must underscore how important it is to enable refugees to have job opportunities, studies, or mobility based on their skills. So what measures could Canada consider in order to strengthen these measures, all the while maintaining its commitment to protecting refugees? So either of our witnesses.
Do you want Sandra?
Sure. So one of the important principles about complementary pathways, this is sort of a new area, and Canada was really a leader with the Economic Mobility Pathways pilot, one of the first countries to implement a program for refugees to come on labor pathways. We have certain principles that are set out. It's important that these programs are in addition to other forms of protection like resettlement and asylum. It's important that people, have the opportunity to make independent decisions, that there are certain protection considerations and that kind of thing. But the whole idea is to have more opportunity for refugees. And Canada actually has been very strong on this and made a very promising commitment at the Global Refugee Forum to turn the pilot that they've started into a permanent program.
Merci beaucoup. Vu que vous parlez des forums mondiaux.
You spoke about the World Refugee Forum. I would like to ask a question. So to our knowledge, are there programs or models put in place in other countries that facilitate the integration of refugees in the labor market that might be an inspiration for Canadian decision makers?
I think that in our experience, Canada has really actually been a leader, especially in the labor mobility pathways for refugees, that we're actually inspiring other countries to look at what we're doing and how Canada is doing it in terms of refugee integration. I think, one of the things, just to add to what Sandra was saying earlier, this program really does rely on a sort of standard and regular processing time for permanent residency. I think one of the challenges with the employment mobility pathway as structured is that the time frame for processing permanent residency started getting longer and longer, trickling into a year and 18 months. And for an employer who's making a hire, that's just an unreasonable time for them to wait to get an employee on board. So the recommendation that we really have is to tighten up that time frame to a 6-month window.
I have very little time left, but I would like to continue. So how do you believe that the government, as well as teaching institutions, employers, how can they be more efficiently work together in order to allow new arrivals to fully use their skills and to contribute to the economic growth of Canada?
I'm happy to kind of take an initial stab, but I think the pilots that we currently have in place are all heading in the right direction to allow that to happen. I think one of our experiences, just to say really quickly, is working very closely through provincial authorities and provincial regulators, because at the provincial level they have a very strong knowledge of the core labor market needs and where we cannot find Canadian talent to meet those needs. So the increased working at the provincial level through these programs like the provincial nominee program is an essential tool in the toolbox.
Merci, Monsieur Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. At this committee, we had a study regarding the equitable distribution of asylum seekers, and there was a great deal of resistance to this, saying that this is not correct to have this distribution of refugees, that people came from different regions. And Mr. Casasola, I think you've indicated that it's interesting from this viewpoint because it sheds light on an approach that requires many different types of solutions. And I think your ideas seem to be similar to the current resettlement pact that exists in Europe. For example, you have the model in Germany, you have the distribution model, which takes into account labor market requirements and the ability of various regions to integrate refugees in their regions. So from what I understand, would you agree with this? Would you agree in seeing a distribution of the refugees that would take into account of their educational backgrounds and based on different skills as well, perhaps Casasola?
The UNHCR was not part of the study that was recently conducted by the committee in this. I believe some of our remarks in relation to the study on C12 did refer to this. In principle, the idea of relocation is not something we oppose to, but it would, again, there's all sorts of qualifiers, but it would be better if one of my other colleagues, one of my legal colleagues would provide you feedback on that. So if you'd like, we could provide you feedback in writing.
D'autres points de vue là-dessus?
Any other viewpoints? If not, have you observed whether refugees and asylum seekers are seeing more barriers in order to have their credentials recognized compared to other types of immigrants, such as the ones that are chosen in economic programs?
Unfortunately, we don't have a line of sight on that, and so we're not service providers in Canada. So I can't really provide you feedback in terms of the issues or any challenges that refugee claimants or protected persons face. We do know statistically that with time the situation does improve, but as far as credential recognition, I'm not aware.
Perhaps I'll just add quickly to that. In our work, we don't work with asylum seekers in Canada. We're working on bringing in refugees as permanent residents into Canada. And I think what we've learned on credential recognition is that the big benefit comes when you don't work at the level of the individual refugee, but you look at the upstream credential alignment. So under that Nova Scotia pharmacy pilot, for example, the provincial regulator went to Jordan and assessed and accredited the training program that the refugees had gone through in Jordan, so that they knew that anybody who had gone through that program would have the necessary credentials to work in Canada after a 3-month upskilling program. So there was an immediate ability for them to have that credential recognized. And that's where you really need the input of the provincial government and the provincial regulator, whatever the sector may be, to ensure that that can happen and we avoid lengthy upskilling and retraining process times.
And have you seen a case where there are persons that you've accompanied that once they arrived here, their diplomas are not recognized?
I mean, our pilots are all very new, but again, because the credentials are being recognized in advance from the regulator, then there's a certainty. So the first cohort, for example, came into Nova Scotia earlier this year, and they're all already working as full-time pharmacists in rural communities.
If I may add, I think this may be the next evolution in this model, where we've seen it in the example in Jordan, but we've also seen similar examples in Kenya and other places where we're looking where Canadian credentials are already being recognized by the institutions providing the training, then trying to recruit from graduates of that program. And we're trying to ensure that refugees have access to these programs so that they could also apply on an equal playing field with other newcomers.
Yeah. Selon vous, les réfugiés.
So, from your view, the refugees who are already here, who arrived for all kinds of other reasons, well, could that be an interesting pool for skilled labor? And in this case, in that case, I think the issue of credential recognition would be important.
Just briefly, what we're interested in, and the EMPP is about unmet needs. Certainly, the opportunities for refugees or refugee claimants, or even permanent residents who came to Canada as refugees, finding success in Canada, we're all in favor of. As far as whether that would be a potential pool, again, it would depend on the circumstances. A lot of the sectors that we've seen that have been recruited through the EMPP have been in like areas of healthcare. I think almost half of them came through working in healthcare, manufacturing, and what was the other one?
Skilled trades.
Skilled trades. And so these have been areas of chronic needs. Certainly, training and upskilling there are wonderful organizations like Refugee Jumpstart, who are trying to help refugees who are in Canada, whether they are refugee claimants or protected persons or permanent residents, to make that liaison to where there are gaps in the economy.
Merci, Monsieur Beaulieu. Thank you, Mr. Casasola. Next, we have, we're going to the second round of questions, which is question and answer for 5 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Menegakis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before us today. My questions are for you today, Mr. Miranda. I'm hugely impressed that you're here. You're here as an individual to talk to us about, this very important topic. In my mind, in my view, you did everything right. You went to high school, got good grades, applied to a good university in a very competitive program, University of Western Ontario, and you graduated from that. You did everything you were asked to do, and then you tried to enter the workforce. It took you 2 years, over 500 applications, to get an entry-level job in this country. My first question, I guess, is how do you feel when you hear that the government is bringing in more foreign tech workers, filling entry-level jobs?
It's quite concerning because I see how difficult it is for me and my fellow recent graduates to find a job. So when I see more people coming in to compete for the jobs that I'm trying to apply for, it's a little bit concerning for sure.
So would you agree that instead of importing talent, that the Liberal government should incentivize companies to train young talent like you, who are already here in Canada, for these entry-level roles?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So, as we heard earlier, Canada's youth unemployment has spiked to about 14.3% nationally. In fact, in the Greater Toronto area, where I live, it's pushing around 20%. Do you believe that our immigration policy here in Canada is currently aligned with helping young Canadians like you find work?
I would say that it's certainly having an impact. I'm not really sure whether the impact is. I'm not really sure whether the immigration policy is the main driver of the issue that I'm facing in particular. But when I see the government investigating whether or not they should bring in more foreign tech workers, that's a little bit concerning to me because I think it could worsen the situation.
You testified that you're making a low wage at a startup currently, despite having an engineering degree from one of the prominent universities in the country. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the massive influx of foreign tech talent is keeping entry-level job wages and jobs depressed for young talent like you?
Thank you for the question. I would say that it's definitely having an impact on it. The amount or the degree to which it's affecting, I'm not really sure. I haven't studied it, but I would say that it's definitely having an impact and certainly making it harder for people like me to find a job.
The Prime Minister spoke about sacrifices our youth will have to make. What sacrifices do you feel you are making and your peers?
The main sacrifice that I've made is that when I graduated university, I wanted to be a software engineer, a software developer, and work in tech on the engineering side. And since I've graduated, I've realized that that's not really going to be possible for me. And so I've had to pivot and try to use other skills to get a position.
You think it'd be beneficial for our committee to invite more young people like you to hear your stories directly from individuals affected, young Canadian youth affected? We hear from a lot of experts that come here, a lot of organizations.
1 minute.
You think it would be beneficial to hear from more young people like you?
Yes, it would, because I think you'll see the scale of the issue. I'm just one person, but there's many more people like me that'll tell you the exact same thing, specifically and especially in software engineering.
So let me ask you this, if I may. If you could tell the Prime Minister one thing, what would you tell him?
I would ask him to make sure that Canada's immigration policy is stress tested against, to make sure that its impact on young people that it doesn't worsen the job market for young people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menegakis. Thank you, Mr. Miranda. Next, we have 5 minutes for Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to I want to thank actually all the witnesses for being here today. And I can appreciate some of your story, Mr. Miranda, because when I was a university student a long time ago, I ended up having a challenging time to find a job. That was over 20 years ago. So I appreciate your story today and your testimony. Our study, though, is actually about refugees, about the system, and about how we can make it better. So it is about jobs, and it's about the future, the building our country, but it's also focused on this in particular. And I want to actually ask about the program that Mr. Casasola, that you were speaking about, the EMPP. And you spoke about its success in helping to help refugees land here in Canada. And are there any other best practices that you've seen in other countries that can help us over here improve that existing program, which you did testify is very good already?
I invite you, Sandra, too.
Thank you. Well, I think has been mentioned, one of the things that we hear from employers and also hiring partners is predictability and speed. And this is the same if you're hiring a refugee to fill your gap as it would be for another type of economic immigrant. And so that is an important feature that we also see other countries. You know, in the early days, Canada was a pioneer and there were only so many refugees being matched with jobs, but it did happen that you'd have, once the UK and Australia and others came along, that you would have a refugee with a job offered at more than one place. And the quicker country often won the candidate, as it were. And so it's an important consideration. I think other great practices are sort of like Steve was talking about, being rooted in communities. So we've also seen small communities where you have young people leaving, where there's kind of ongoing trouble matching, finding workers. That's where EMPP has been very successful. I think those are some of the key things I'd highlight.
Right, and I mean, the EMPP and our asylum system in general, or I should say refugee system in general, where we do welcome people who are deeply vulnerable, who have a personal threat to their life, a potential threat to their life or safety, is actually part of our international obligations, and is respecting the Refugee Convention of 1951, which Canada has incorporated in IRPA. And the Supreme Court has said it fulfills our responsibilities towards that particular international covenant. And that's why we're talking about this today, just situate the conversation again. So you did testify earlier that to have a more rapid speed, that 6 months would be ideal to actually have people pass through. And how this helps those who are deeply vulnerable to be well employed and land here and be integrated. When these same people actually, and I open this up to you too, Mr. Masson, when these same qualified people are not having this program to their avail, what happens to them? How do you see them being different from those who actually do use this program, the MPP?
If I may.
Please.
Thank you. And certainly, please, Steve, if you have something to add. To be clear, as you noted, Canada plays an important role in terms of having an asylum system which protects people who seek its protection
1 minute.
as per the convention. Also, it's a leading resettlement country, and for the refugees who are among the most vulnerable, who have got the greatest, most acute protection problems, this is a way to access the economic immigration program for other refugees who have the skills that Canada is looking. So this is additional. And it's been a real important thing, but it's not for all refugees, of course.
Certainly. And nor should it be for all refugees, because as you pointed out, that we fulfill the obligations independent of the economic landing of these people who are deeply vulnerable. I'd like to open up in the last 20 seconds to any further comments from one person.
I'll just say quickly that, as I said earlier, the EMPP is a really important program. We would love to unlock the potential of the rest of the immigration system to be more open and accessible to refugees, because there are significant barriers, and we're working through programs like the Provincial Nominee Program to see how that may be possible, so that we can take more advantage of refugee talent that actually is just going to waste, because in their current context, they have no ability usually to access jobs or work.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Maintenant, c'est à vous, Monsieur Beaulieu.
Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes. So globally, to continue on the issue of these delays, in our riding offices, we face a great deal of delays for asylum claimants. It takes several years. Have you also seen that as being a problem? You spoke about a 6-month waiting time. That would be great, but is it possible to achieve that?
Well, when we're referring to the asylum process, it's quite different than we're talking about the selection of persons overseas. So I need to distinguish between those people who are going before the Immigration Refugee Board, who make an initial claim, who are waiting for a hearing but are able to work once they receive their work permit. What we're concerned about is when an employer in Canada wants to offer a possibility for a refugee to enter through an economic immigration program, when that wait is longer than 6 months, sometimes the employer is not interested anymore, and we lose that potential solution. So that's our underlying concern.
Les délais de...
So the wait for renewing a work permit, and we've seen all kinds of terrible cases of people who are working, they were recruited by a company, and then they are waiting for their work permit renewal. Because every time there are certain waits. Is that something that you also see in your own observations?
I can't offer any comment on that because we don't work in that space.
Maybe just to add as a point of clarification, I mean, we're really talking about here about people who are coming in and getting permanent residency status. So the work permit is not something that it's not one of the tools that they're using to access these jobs. So we don't work in that space of work permits or renewing work permits, because the pathway is a pathway to residency, to permanent residency.
Tantôt, vous avez parlé d'un projet.
And earlier you mentioned a pilot project as well. And you've brought together companies with refugees that were in a position to meet with their requirements. Could you perhaps expand on that?
Yes, just to kind of reiterate the pharmacy pilot, which I think is sort of the most promising example that we have right now. You know, the situation is that in Nova Scotia, there's I think a gap of around 250.
15 seconds left.
Pharmacy jobs, and you know, they've tried various strategies to fill them domestically, including through significant signing bonuses, but can't find the talent locally. So the pathway to identify refugees who have the skill set that Nova Scotia needs and bring them over has been an immediate solution to the gaps, and is now allowing pharmacies in rural communities to operate where before they could not.
I thank you, Mr. Mason. Merci, Monsieur Beaulieu. Okay, since we only have about 5 minutes left, I'm going to give 2.5 minutes to Mr. Davies and 2.5 minutes to Ms. Lapointe. Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be really quick. Mr. Mason, I'm really interested in how you have done the due diligence up front that people coming into Canada are already on a pathway to permanent residency. We have a shortage of doctors in Canada, a serious shortage of doctors. Are you competing with other countries to find, and have you had any people that were in the medical field that you could have brought here, but is there a competitiveness in the ecosystem with other countries?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think there is an increasing competitiveness as more countries get into this game. You know, I think, for example, the German government has been very aggressive on some of the labor mobility. Now, they don't offer permanent residency, so Canada has a value add that the German government doesn't. But
you come across many medical doctors as you...
There certainly are a cohort of trained medical doctors in the refugee community that could be you know, targets, and that's one of the things that we're looking at right now is really working at the provincial level to identify where the needs are and where they can't be filled domestically, and you know, and figure that out.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you. So we have the United Nations here today, this committee. We've got federally taxpayer-funded organizations here on this committee who are advocating to bring in more refugees into Canada. And their testimony advocates for reducing backlogs, for processing high-skilled refugee applications from 2 years to 2 months. So Ethan, you're a 24-year-old computer science graduate from a reputable university. You've been looking for a job in your field for 2 years. And do you think the government's focus should instead be to reduce the time for you to get a job from 2 years to 2 months?
I would say certainly that the government should be focusing on making sure that young Canadians can get entry-level positions where they can improve their skills, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And months ago, the Liberal Prime Minister spoke to a room full of Canadian university students, and he told them to, quote, make more sacrifices. All the while, the Liberals in their last budget announced billions of dollars to attract foreign talent to come to Canada with absolutely nothing to address the youth unemployment crisis. So do you think you and your classmates and your friends have sacrificed enough?
I don't really want to comment too much on how much I've sacrificed or other people have sacrificed, but I would definitely say that it's hard to be a recent graduate right now.
You think you've been left behind?
Thank you, Mr. Miranda. Thank you, Mr. Ho. I was wrong. We actually have Mr. Fredescatos for 2.5 minutes. Please, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Mr. Miranda, I'm not just going to say this because you're a Western graduate. I think you've handled yourself very well today. I think, unfortunately, you've been put in a position a few times where it's difficult for you to respond and put in an awkward position in some ways, with all due respect to my colleagues. But I'll leave that aside. I do want to ask, are you working now?
I am working right now,
that's great.
yes. I'm not working as a software engineer, though.
I understand that. Okay. But at least with the time that you've devoted to your studies, and certainly a lot of talent, I'm sure, I'm glad to hear that you are employed. I wish we could talk more, and maybe we can talk offline, but I do have limited time. So I'm going to move over to Mr. Casola. And actually, it's the same question for Ms. Elgersma and Mr. Mason. There's a bit of subtext to some of the arguments that has been presented here today. The subtext we should just do away with, and we should be very direct and ask. Well, I'll ask the direct question. Are refugees responsible for stopping Canadians from getting jobs? Mr. Casola, go ahead.
Refugees, to be clear, refugees are permanent residents. Some are citizens. Canada has welcomed refugees as part of their history. It's part of Canada's DNA. And so I don't know if any sort of correlation can be made between the experience of refugees finding employment versus other sectors of the economy. We know that they work hard like everybody else, that they contribute to Canada. And
Sir, I have maybe 45 seconds left, but the point about contribution is an important one. Mr. Mason and Ms. Elgersma, if there's an opportunity.
I mean, I'll just say that this is not an either-or situation. It's a yes-and situation. Of course, we need to do both. You know, we need to ensure that young Canadians have the opportunities they need. There are still going to be critical labor shortages in this country. We're not trying to manufacture these. These are driven by employers and the provinces who know where their labor needs are. And so those need to be filled. So we need to do both. We're not in opposition here. We're in agreement.
Thank you.
And I would just add that our approach to this topic of global talent and attracting it is how can refugees be included in that and participate on a level playing field with immigrants from other places, in essence.
And it doesn't have to, I think I have 20 seconds, Madam Chair. It does not have to be to the detriment of Canada. Canada can be a welcoming place. It always has been. At least I should be careful about that. We have seen real advances made in decades past where we do welcome people from all across the world. There are challenges certainly in the Canadian economy, but it's this kind of either or, as you put it there, Mr. Mason. We would be misplaced if we focused the conversation within that framework. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, Mr. Fredescatos, I think it's way over. So thank you,
I'll note
Mr.
he nodded his
Mason.
head.
And thank you, Mr. Fredescatos. Feel free to send in the answer to that. Anything formal can be sent in by letter and will be considered by this committee. So with that, I want to say a huge thank you to the excellent witnesses of the second panel. I want to thank my colleagues for their excellent questions. That ends this meeting today. Thank you.